After years of keeping quiet, Gene Hackman's three children finally talk about the woman who was with their father until the end of his life. They tell an untold story full of buried memories and haunting last words. Why have they been quiet all this time? What really happened? The truth about this mysterious woman will change everything we thought we knew about Gene Hackman and his life. Statements from the Hackman family will leave the public in shock. During his decades-long career, Hackman played some of the most famous roles in movie history, including those in The French Connection, Unforgiven, and The Royal Tenenbaums. But behind the stag's glitz, Hackman's personal life was very private. He always kept his family out of the public eye. However, after Hackman and his wife Betsy O'Rourke died, his children Christopher, Elizabeth, and Leslie went public for the first time to talk about their lives, once 12, about the great loss they were facing. Their appearance was not only a way to honor their parents, but also a way to honor the people who had been their strong support. Leslie Ann Hackman is Gene Hackman's youngest daughter. She was born in 1966. Unlike her father, who was in a lot of movies, Leslie chose a quiet life and avoided media attention. But this time, she couldn't hide. When Leslie showed up in Los Angeles, people could see both strength and pain in her eyes. 151. She tried to hide her sadness as she told the press about her parents. "We need to wait and get information from the police. We didn't expect that we would have to go there and look at everything in the house, so we have a lot to do, but yes, we will go to New Mexico." This wasn't just a statement, it was also part of her journey to accept the truth. Her parents were dead. As a child, it's the saddest thing to see a house full of memories of your parents become a void. Elizabeth Hackman, born in 1962, was Gene Hackman's second daughter. Over the years, she also chose a quiet life away from Hollywood, but at this very important time, she couldn't keep quiet. Together with her sister Lizzie and niece Annie, Elizabeth released a statement full of emotion and deep sadness about the death of their father, Gene Hackman, and his wife, Betsy. He was loved and admired by millions of people around the world for his amazing acting career, but to us, he was always just Dad and Grandpa. We will miss him very much, and are very three-paw saddened by this loss. To his children, Gene Hackman was a Hollywood icon, but to the public, he was just a loving father. And that's what they wanted to remember. Gene Hackman wasn't just a movie legend, he was also a family man who spent his life protecting those he loved. Christopher Hackman, born in 1960, is Gene Hackman's oldest son and only son with his first wife, Faye Maltz. Christopher chose a very different path from his father, not the limelight or blockbuster movies. He lived a simple life. Life not used to being in public, but Christopher always had a special relationship with his father, Gene. In an interview in 1984, Christopher said, "We still hugged to this day, and I thank God we can do that." This may have shown how close the two were, even though they didn't often say it in public. After the deaths of Gene and Betsy, the Hackman family quickly released an official statement. It was both a tribute and a way for them to show their grief. 14. In the statement, they stressed that even though Hackman was a movie legend, to his family he was always a loving and devoted father and grandfather. This showed again that even though the world saw Hackman as a great actor, to his family he was always a simple, quiet, and loving man. Betsy Arakawa wasn't a well-known name in the entertainment industry, but to Gene Hackman, she was the most important partner. A talented classical pianist, Betsy walked with Hackman for more than 30 years. As she spoke, Leslie didn't forget to mention her stepmother. They had a wonderful marriage, and I credit his wife Betsy for keeping him healthy. She took very good care of him and was always worried about his health, so I am grateful to her for that, and I am very saddened by her death. Betsy was not only Gene Hackman's wife, but also the woman who always supported him in his last years. Without Betsy, and without Gene, the memories of them will forever remain in 524, the Hackman family's hearts. The deaths of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa left a hole in the hearts of their family, friends, and fans that could never be filled. But through the honest stories of their children, we can see that their legacy lives on, even though the pain is still there. With unity and love, the Hackman family will keep the flame of memory alive and protect the values that Gene Hackman left behind. Chapter 2, Echoes of a Harmonious Union, reflecting on Gene and Betsy's bond. Hackman's famous roles as edgy characters in the movies that made him famous are often what people think of when they think of him. But Gene Hackman was also a husband, a lover, and a man who found peace in Betsy Arakawa's love. Gene Hackman met Betsy Arakawa in the late 1980s when he was at the height of his career. Betsy was a classical pianist of Hawaiian descent and 30 years younger than Gene. Their differences in age, background, and life seemed like they would never be able to get along. 637, bond stronger when he met. Betsy Gene had been married to his first wife, Faye Malt, for a long time and lived with her for over 30 years after the first marriage ended. Gene seemed to have lost interest in love, but Betsy came along like a breath of fresh air, giving him warmth, kindness, and patience that he didn't know he still needed. Leslie Hackman, Gene's daughter, once said, "I am grateful to Betsy for always being by my father's side, taking care of him diligently and bringing him joy. Joy in his last years." Unlike his first marriage, where he was busy with work and took long work trips, life with Betsy was very different. When they got married in 1991, Gene started to cut back on his work and spend more time with his family. In 2004, he decided to retire and leave Hollywood to live a simple life with his beloved wife Betsy. Betsy was more than just Gene's wife. She understood him in a way that not everyone could during their more than 30 years together. In his last years, when he wasn't a movie star but just an old man enjoying his retirement, Betsy was the one who cared for him every day. Leslie once said, "Betsy's dedication really kept my father healthy. She took very, very good care of him and was always concerned about his health." It was because of that care that Gene Hackman, despite his age, kept his mental clarity and good health for a long time. Gene Hackman's life changed completely after Betsy died, and the sequel to the 831, woman who had been with him for over 30 years and seen every stage of his growth after limelight was no longer by his side. The void she left behind could not be filled. Even though he didn't appear in the media very often, those close to Gene noticed that he became quieter after Betsy left. The man who was once strong on screen was now quieter than ever. Elizabeth Gene's second daughter once said, in private, "My father has always been a steady man, but after Betsy left I knew he had changed. Not because he..." Although Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa were no longer alive, their love story lived on. Their love wasn't showy or loud, but it was deep enough that those around them would cherish it. Their love wasn't expressed in flowery language, but through every small act of care. Betsy had become an important part of Gene Hackman's life, not only as his wife, but also as his friend and companion in his last years. Even though they were gone, the sounds of a happy marriage would still be heard. Chapter 3. The Shattered Sanctuary Family's Turmoil Amidst New Tragedies. In the days after Betsy Arrett's death, the house that had been Gene Hackman's peaceful home seemed emptier than ever. There were still photos of them together, the piano that Betsy used to play in the late afternoons, and the books that Gene read over and over again, but there was a scary silence over everything. No one expected that the Hackman family would be torn apart in such a short amount of time. 10/21. The cause of Betsy Arakawa's death wasn't immediately known to everyone. At first, her family only said that she had died of illness, but later the truth shocked many. Betsy had high-risk pulmonary syndrome, a rare but very deadly disease caused by a virus that mostly spreads through rodents and leads to severe respiratory distress syndrome. As the disease gets worse, the lungs are severely damaged, causing acute respiratory failure. This is the scariest thing about it all, 1058, is that it often gets worse quickly, sometimes in just a few days from the first symptoms. No one could have imagined that Betsy's rare disease would kill her. She had never been sick before and was healthy and full of energy just weeks before she got sick. The disease hit like a storm, swift and devastating in a short time. The woman who had always been Gene Hackman's support system was gone when Betsy died. Gene Hackman was still there, but he wasn't fully aware of what was going on. 1134. Around him in his last years, Gene was dealing with heart disease and progressive Alzheimer's. His memories were broken up into pieces, and conversations and faces that he knew slowly turned into strangers. Gene's children thought he probably wasn't lucid enough to understand that Betsy had left him for good. In the days after his wife died, he didn't act like a normal person would when losing a spouse. He didn't ask about Betsy or talk about her like he used to. Sometimes Gene sat in silence for hours, 12:39, looking out the window for hours, his eyes wide, as if he were trying to find something he couldn't name. Leslie Hackman once said that the most painful thing for her was not that her father lost the person he loved most, but that he probably didn't know it. He didn't cry or ask, he just sat there quietly, as if a part of his memory had drifted away with her. But that wasn't the worst part. A few months after Betsy, Gene Hackman also died. His heart disease had gotten worse. Boltsworth, 43, became worse recently, along with the effects of getting older and Alzheimer's. His health quickly got worse. When the news of G. Hackman's death came out, Hollywood and fans all over the world were shocked, but for his family, it was not just the loss of a movie legend. It was also the loss of a father, grandfather, and husband they loved. Elizabeth Hackman said through tears, "We were still reeling from Betsy's death, and now my father is gone too. It's like a nightmare you can't wake up." Gene and Betsy had built a peaceful life together, away from the noise of Hollywood, enjoying the little things in life together. Now both of them were gone, leaving Gene's children in a state of complete emptiness. The deaths of both their father and stepmother in a short amount of time left an irreplaceable void in the hearts of Lizzie Elizabeth and Christopher Hackman. They not only lost two of their closest loved ones, but they also had to face continuing life without the presence of 1351, those who were the core of their family. Christopher Hackman, the oldest son, said in an interview, "We always thought there was still plenty of time. We thought we could make more memories with them, but then everything went by too quickly. We didn't have time to prepare. We didn't have time to say everything we wanted to." Even though Gene Hackman and Betsy Arikanawa are no longer with us, their love for each other, the moments they shared, and the memories they made will live on in the hearts of their family, friends, and fans. The fact that they walked hand in hand for decades showed that their love was strong and that even death could not break their bond. Today, the Hackman family is still getting used to living without Gene and Betsy by their side, but they know that Gene and Betsy are still together somewhere, just like they were all their lives. Chapter 4. The Guardians of Legacy Upholding Gene Hackman's lasting influence during his life. Gene Hackman was never one to brag. He let his work speak for itself. 15 left the limelight, but what he left behind was a constant source of inspiration for the audience. His children, who grew up in the shadow of a talented but humble father, knew that this legacy could not be forgotten. Christopher Hackman, the eldest son, once said, "Our father always taught us that true greatness lies in humility and perseverance." He was never one to brag about himself, but we know that his contributions deserve to be remembered, which is why Gene's 3 children were determined to become the 1536. Gene Hackman's children wanted future generations to remember more than just him as an anonymous Hollywood legend on a list of Oscar-winning actors. They wanted people to remember the man, his story, and the values he worked hard to uphold. To do this, they planned a series of special events to honor him. One of the first ideas was a film exhibition called Hackman: A Legacy in Motion, where fans could see rare behind-the-scenes photos and other valuable memorabilia from classic movies. 1612 related to his career. Leslie Hackman, his youngest daughter, said, "Dad never wanted to be put on a pedestal, but he would have loved the idea of people getting together to talk about his movies. He always believed that movies are made for the audience, not the actors, which is why they decided to invite both people who had worked with Hackman and fans who had been with him for decades. They wanted to hear from people who had laughed, cried, and been moved by every character Gene Hackman played on screen." In addition, Hackman's children planned to do a series of interviews and special documentaries with actors and directors who had worked with him to talk about how he had influenced them. Clint Eastwood, Dustin Hoffman, and even younger actors who looked up to Hackman were invited to share their fond